Lamar Cantrell with Cantrell Realty. I'm a realtor, been a realtor for over 20 years. Been a member of the National Association of Realtors and the Georgia Association of Realtors. You don't have to wear a pin to be a realtor, but you have to be a realtor to wear the pin. This is my partner, Travis Herndon.
Hey, I'm Travis Herndon with Cantrell Realty. I'm a realtor as well. I have over 19 years in the land development and real estate business, and Lamar's going to tell you just why we're doing these videos.
Yeah, hopefully we can put together from time to time some educational videos using different industries that we interface with that may be a help to our buyers and sellers, and even people that maybe own estates and are just managing properties until the time's right for you to sell. Hopefully these videos will be a big help to everybody. I'd like to introduce our special guest today, Russell Howard with R.W. Howard Surveying Company. I'd like to have him tell us a little bit about himself.
My name is Russell Howard. I started my business 11 years ago in Jasper. Moved back home with a license and decided that I wanted to practice surveying here in the county.
We felt like it was important to have you on today to kind of help people understand the importance of surveying, the different phases of when it's important, when they buy property, when they're maintaining their property, or when they decide to sell their property. A lot of pitfalls that can happen.
That's right. A lot of people aren't familiar with the process and how it all works and how we're all interrelated in transactions of land. You know, realtors, real estate attorneys, land surveyors, potential engineers, different services that are all critical to a real estate process and to property ownership throughout time. And each one of them is you know, does a certain piece of work and a certain professional quality for what you need to do. I'm just a piece of the cog, so to speak, that people use my surveys for those land transactions.
So you mentioned the process with closing attorneys and the process to close a property. Talk to me a little bit about the difference between the survey that you do and conveyance of the property, and sometimes the confusion people have on that.
That's right. Yeah, my job as a surveyor is to retrace land per the deed, make measurements, area, show things, property lines and whatnot. But again, you know, my survey is just a document that's used in the process. A survey doesn't necessarily mean that it's official or that became a piece of property or that was conveyed in title. A survey is generally used to convey title, but it's really the deed. You know, Georgia standards require that a warranty deed is made out, you know, for the actual public conveyance of the property. Sometimes that has a plat, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's representative of that plat, but a lot of times the survey, like I said, is just a piece of the equation. You know, it's just something to work from to generate that actual property conveyance. You know, it's showing the public, i.e. those property owners, a picture of their property.
Just in general, can you explain to us how surveying has progressed as far as the old methods versus new methods?
Yeah, even in my 10 or 11 years working here in the county, we've gosh, I've moved through all the way from just, you know, regular instruments to Bluetooth connectivity to robotic instrumentations to, you know, high precision GPS. The survey, you know, profession is changing exponentially with new equipment. You know, behind me we have just a simple horizontal level, you know, just keeping things at the same elevation. That's a very simple piece of equipment, but like I said, you know, the differences that have come around even just in the past decade, the ability for me to just step out and come out of the truck with a high precision GPS device and hit a button, and you know, the precision on that thing is good enough that it's survey quality. Couldn't do that years ago. Had to chop a line through those woods and, clear a good, easy path.
Well, with that confidence survey that gives you precision down to at least a dime or smaller, having that, why does a seller or a buyer need that, or should they want that?
As I alluded to, anybody has this technology. Your phone has 5-meter accuracy. You pull out your iPhone right now and you get your GPS point, and if you've got an accurate survey that's got a GPS coordinate on it, or you can extrapolate somehow those positions, then yes, you can go do that just as easily as I. That's where you get into precision versus accuracy. And surveying is known in the state of Georgia as a quasi-legal profession. So I take all my fancy equipment and I measure things with it. But in the beginning, I'm starting with trying to find original monumentation of property, at the base level. And what that comes down to is accuracy as opposed to precision. Circling back around to your question, it's really the accuracy. Where I start is the courthouse, sometimes the tax assessor, but it's how the property was conveyed. What did you actually buy?
Hey Russell, I got a question for you. A lot of times we see a phrase on deeds that's more or less. And we see that a lot. Explain to us a little bit about how important that can be.
Very. That's sort of that's the most popular indemnification clause that I've ever seen in my life. It seems like every deed that I read is more or less, and being that property is as valuable as it is, seems like somebody would get a better number than more or less. There's a lot of ways that can happen. One of the ways is of course, accuracy measurement. Just me as a surveyor, tiny little measurements can make a difference in square footage over thousands of feet. Just a half an inch over 1,000 feet can then add substantial amount of acreage. So, like we said before, those monuments are the monuments. They are the true line. The difference in measurement where that monument was and the square footage, it could change just a fuzz. So we always like to say more or less. Those are things that are not really problematic. Things that are problematic is when it's a lot more or less. And those things happen for a lot of different reasons. Some of them are not so much negligent or blatant or malfeasant, I guess you could say, but just discrepancies in title. Somebody missed the fact that a piece of property was split up a little bit, boundary line was changed, something like that. So it comes down to it that you don't own a property that you think you did. Well, you own the same property that you always had. It was just described or shown to you a little bit wrong. One of the big things that I see in our community, rural areas, is that many properties have a lot of public takes that have not been accounted for over time. That public road that was shown on your plat of your family acreage, the original surveyor back in 1960 showed that as a public road, and it was indeed a public road. But they didn't really follow the same standards in that they weren't showing that as a public right-of-way, and they didn't accept that acreage from your property. So if you have 2,000 feet of road that was platted and it's a 60-foot right-of-way, that's a substantial amount of acreage less than you really had in the first place. So there's lots of ways that things can be more or less and why you use it. And it's basically, I think, just a way for everybody to absolve themselves of the potential differences in title throughout time. The tiny bits are, like I explained, just the slight discrepancies that make it 4,980 square feet as opposed to 4,940 square feet. That's a more or less. That's not even really a more or less. That's just a fraction, a hair, so to speak. the more egregious more or less statements are more of just I think a way to absolve, a professional's liability from, having found or not found something. Surveyors can do the same thing. We're required to look at, current title and, show current title and get on with our lives, so to speak. But a lot of times some of those problems are buried so far back in title, they're still legal and they still hold, but they're not in that current title. So a lot of times, whether it be a real estate agent or an attorney writing a meets and bounds description or a surveyor writing a meets and bounds description, a property description for an attorney, that's just become kind of a common statement just to kind of accept the fact that property is not exact and perfect every time. It goes back to the precision and accuracy. I was precise every time I threw that dart, but unless those darts are stacked upon one another, I wasn't hitting it exactly. I got the bullseye every time, but it was just a little fuzz difference.
Russell, do surveys expire?
Not really, I guess is a good answer. The information on a survey is dated, of course. It's just like anything, we put a date on it. The information on the survey is really what's important. It's not the name of who it is, who it was made for, anything like that. We're just giving as a surveyor, I'm giving a product and a representation of a deed, let's say, on a certain date. That information doesn't really ever expire. Many times we retrace deeds and properties are sold using a survey that could be hundreds of years old, very old surveys. The information on that survey is still valid. What you have to wonder is how valid is that information, and is it still, is it still the same piece of property that old survey shows? Throughout time, there could have been something that happened where a boundary line changed, an agreement in a deed, where they, gave a piece of property to a neighbor or changed a line somewhere. A piece is taken out. The westerly portion of a survey is accepted and given to another property owner. Well, that original survey is still 100% valid. In fact, it's as valid as the survey that came later, because if I'm starting with A and taking B out, then I have to know what A is, so that survey is always valid. There's no real shelf life to my field data, so my personal surveys I can expound upon through time, through my own professional comfort. But what you need to be worried about the expiration of the survey itself is it still representative of the property currently? Because a lot of things can happen through time. That survey is still 100% valid of your family land that shows 120, 160 acres potentially. But that really just shows the boundaries of the land, and it doesn't take into consideration, again, public right-of-way of a road, stream buffers that you're not allowed to get into, all kind of easements, covenants, restrictions, things like that of record that you're not allowed to do, that are all tied to the property, but not necessarily shown on that survey. That survey, again, is valid. Technical expiration on the information there, but is it still correct now? Is really the big question, I guess.
Russell, one of my sales pitches in real estate is you get more for your money in the mountains. Surveyor explained to me, the surveyor looks at everything like it's flat.
That's true.
So if you got the hillside of Sharp Top out here, and you actually go 1,000 feet up the side of Sharp Top, you actually haven't traveled laterally 1,000 feet.
That's right.
So, it's been interesting to me, the conversations that I've gotten into with people that don't understand that the way the survey looks at property as it's flat. So you get more surface area in the mountains, right? So you get more for your money.
sure is harder to build on though.
Yeah.
But yes, you're exactly right. In surveying, what we use is what's referred to as plane geometry. Plane as in like planar. So our measurements are all horizontal distances, and they assume a flat surface. So yeah, you're right. You know, an acre of land in a flat surface is less than an acre of land up here in the mountains because we just have more land in between those two horizontal points. So yeah, it's a little bit different. Makes measuring harder. You know, measuring down the hill is not exactly the same. We were talking earlier, pacing through the woods. A little bit different when you're trying to pace through the woods and gauge distances and things like that. So yeah, a little bit different.
I grew up under the understanding that an acre was 210 by 210. My dad said it, my grandpa said it, and his dad probably said it. And then when I got in real estate school, and it never really came out to 43,560 square feet. I'm like, something's wrong with my math somewhere.
Right.
That is the old timers. I mean, they hang on hard to the 210 by 210 rule. So, do you get into that?
I do a lot because, again, we're in a rural community where some property transfers are just a simple meets and bounds description, even if that technical sometimes. I've come across a lot that, you just deed an acre in the southwest corner to my son, and that was about the only description you got.
Mm-hmm.
The 210 by 210, that's pretty close.
Mhm.
I think it's really close. But not exactly, but that was a good even number for everybody to remember and pull down and throw on the ground and, just keep
Right.
remembering throughout time. That's a perfect square,
Mm-hmm.
that equals almost an acre. So that's just your typical piece, and I guess, your typical measurement.
But we do large land tracts, and when you get into, when you have 171 of those perfect little squares, the 210 by 210 rule really,
That's out the window.
yeah, it is.
That's out the window, because then, you take into consideration that everything is a factor of numbers squared as opposed to just, the numbers themselves. So they're not just one time bigger, they're 4 times bigger than they ought to be, or smaller, whichever you're looking at. Yeah, and the shape of the property, your orientation of your property, where it's located, all those things have to do with, what kind of services I'm gonna have to provide to you. It might be an acre of land, but man, that might be difficult. Somebody who's just purchased a piece of property on Fire Tower Road, they purchased it, just sight unseen, just bought it, and wondering why the survey up there on that 3 or 5 acres is such an exorbitant rate. Well, it's only a complicated system of ropes and pulleys that I'm going to be able to use to get up to the top of your property to be able to find that original monument. So, orientation, shape, acreage means really nothing except for acreage. How far is it around your property? Where is it located? Geographically, is it convoluted and strange? So yeah, 210 by 210. That's just an old number that just you kind of remembered as what's an acre. But that's just the fundamental unit. Like you said, you get into larger properties, and that acre, those numbers become obscure because it's so large.
Right. And then that you see more common here, I guess in a rural community, the grandpa splits his property up. I see, very often I see center line of the branch is the property line. And as we well know, the center line of that branch can change over time. So that's another thing that I see happening a lot.
Right.
So,
And that comes into play with the more or less question a lot of times. The hierarchical nature of boundary order, natural boundaries, number 1, high on the list. A ridge, a stream, the center line of a creek, rock outcrop, natural boundaries pretty much trump all when it comes down to things. So, riparian rights in Georgia, as that stream moves, as does your property line with the thread of the creek. So, you know, surveyors are looking into all that. It's not just a line, you know, we're always looking into what's the description of the property. Acreage is dead last on the list when it comes to hierarchical order of evidence. I'm looking at natural boundaries, you know, man-made boundaries, you know, corner pins, monuments and such. But at the very, very, very bottom of that list is acreage.
Wow. Well, Russell, we'd like to thank you again for today and being here and sharing your knowledge with us, and we gratefully appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thank y'all. It was a pleasure, and glad I could be here and help out.
Thank you. And we'd like to remind everybody that if they're buying or selling tracts of land or homes, to think of us here at Cantrell Realty.
Thanks, Russell.
Thank you.